on Oracle. That's 21C, the version. So of course, I'll start first from showing you the design. This is the actual design that I've implemented. I will make, of course, 5 tables as you specified. The table that will handle the records for the student, and the table that will handle the records for the lecturer, the faculty, the department, and anything related to that. So now I will share my screen. I just want to open my Oracle, and of course I'm sure you can tell it's now open, and I want to actually now create a new connection for the newly to be created database, which I will call JDBC. And of course here I'm now specifying a new connection. This is okay. So I will specify now the database name, which is JDBC as you specified. And since I've installed the HR, automatically I want this to be navigating to the HR as I'm doing the connections. So our username is HR. That's what I actually set during the installation. And also, of course, also the password is HR, which is small. So yeah, I'm sure you can also tell that that's the lower cases and the like. And on the service name here, the service name XE, of course, PDB1, that's the actual service name. If I test the connection, it's successful because the status here is automatically showing that yes, the connection is 100% successful. And now I can connect. So I'm now inside my database. You can tell that this is ZDB database, and I can now start doing all the things related to it, implement the queries and anything that's related to this database. So the very first table that I want to create is the students table, and it has a number of attributes inside, but I will lessen the number of attributes due to time. So the first query that I will pass on is simply the query that will allow me to create the first table. So create table, and of course the table name is student, and there I open the parentheses. I even close because I know I will do more and more queries as I proceed on this video presentation. So this is the table name, and the very first thing that I will create, or the very first attributes that I will create, is simply the attributes that will hold on to the primary key of this table or this relation, because the relation is simply a table when it comes to database. So I will name this student ID, and of course the data type, it should be related to numbers, which is simply number, because number is simply the keyword that will stand in for the integers when it comes to the data type that are being used inside my Oracle SQL developer via the implementation using the HR. So I want this of course this more like an attribute not to be now, hence specifying that it shouldn't be now, and this same attribute should be a primary key. So yes, that I've done, and of course a comma. I can now again implement another attribute inside the students table, which I will call first name, as the first name of a student, and I'm making that difference between first name and last name because I want to base my attention on the respect to one atomic value per each and every field of the database. So first name, and of course the variable character. The variable character 2 is the actual data type of this, and of course let me just put the length to 30 to save some memory space and the like. And then the other attribute is simply last name, and of course also the data type is variable character 2, which is standing in for string. If we were to understand now our other types of common data types that we know, variable character standing in for string. And another field or another attributes that I want to add inside the students table is simply the student age. The student age, and the data type is number, because you can tell that age is simply a number and anything related to that. So I can now execute this query to see if automatically we've created, or to see if we've by default made a table that will hold on to the student's details. And if I was to execute Yeah, down here we can tell that table student created, hence we've successfully made that table. Let's now proceed to see how this will look if we are now to select the entire table for we to output the content inside that. So if I say select that asterisk from student, because that's the table name, select from student and the semicolon for I to execute that. If I was now to implement this, of course now I expect to return the entire table, the actual design of the table that I have implemented, which is the students table that is inside the JDBC as a type of database that's based on Oracle as an SQL developer. So if I was to run this command, of course you can tell that yes, we even have the fields, we have the student ID, we have the first name, we also have the last name, and finally we also have the student age as the total number of attributes that are inside. So the next table that I want to create using the same properties create, the next table I want to create is the faculty. So create table, which is called, of course, faculty. That's the name of the table, and this faculty as a table, these are the attributes that I want to be inside this table. So the very first attribute is simply an attribute that will hold on to the primary key of this table as the faculty table, which we commonly know as the department table. So the very first thing I want to implement is actually the attribute called faculty number, because this will hold on as a primary key for the faculty. Let me use the lower cases as the faculty num, simply that, and of course this should be of data type number standing as integers. This shouldn't be, of course, now, hence not now, and this should remain as a primary key for the entire database. And the second thing is simply the faculty name of this table, and this, of course, the data type is variable character 2, the length to save that memory space, and of course we know there isn't any department that would exceed 30 characters, so we'll just base that and restrict that to 30. And we can try our best to process the query and to see if we've created, of course, the table that will hold on to the details of the faculty thingies and anything related to E. So let's now treat this. We can now tell that, of course, at first we created the students table, now we've created the faculty table. Can we try to see and select the content that's inside the faculty table for we to understand if we've, of course, now made that? Yes, so use the query select, that's SQL, select from faculty. Yeah, select from faculty. Now, if we were to run this query, let's say I write this because we want the query just to be, yeah. So again, you can tell that we have the two attributes of the faculty in our final result field. We have the faculty name and the faculty name. Hence, we've successfully created and made the actual design for the faculty table. The next table that I want now to create is simply the table that will hold on to the details of the lecturer. And if you paid much attention to the design that I presented at the beginning of this video, I'm sure you can also tell that the lecturer as a table is receiving, of course, the faculty number as a foreign key inside this table. And as we implement now the details for the faculty, we should also make sure that we implement also a foreign key or an attribute that will hold the value that will be coming from the faculty number as a table on its own from the faculty table or from the faculty relation, because a relation simply stands in for a table when it comes to database management system. So some of the queries that we need to implement is simply to say create table, and this table we want to create should be called of course the lecturer table, and of course we open the parentheses, we also close, the number of attributes that should be inside this table, we will need first to have an attribute that will hold on to the primary key of the entire table of the lecturers. So the very first thing to implement is simply the lecturer ID. The lecturer ID this is based on number as a data type, since number will stand in for int as a data type, and integer is simply a data type that deals with all numbers. Similarly, that's how also a number works. So lecturer ID number, this should not be now, hence to specify a key thing is saying it shouldn't be now, and this is also a primary key for this table, and of course a comma. The next thing that we want to keep inside this table is simply the lecturer's first. Okay, let me just say L first name, which is simply the lecturer's first name, and this should be of variable character, which is vec2, and of course the length will also stick that to 30, and we have a comma. The next thing is simply now that's for the last name. The next thing is simply now the lecturer's first name, of which should be of type variable character 2, and we'll again restrict this to 30 as the total length of the characters that needs to be inside this thingy. So this should be now lecturer's last name, LL name, and yeah, anything related to it. Now don't forget, we said we can also keep maybe the age of the lecturer inside this table. So to keep the age of the lecturer, we'll just say lecturer age should be of type number, and that then we've specified. Then another thing that should be kept inside the lecturer's table is simply now the foreign key that will receive the primary key from the faculty as a table on its own. So if we have the faculty as a table and we have the primary key for that faculty, which is faculty num, then we expect another attribute inside the lecturer's table to act as a receiver for the primary key that's coming from the faculty table and anything related to that. So for we to do that, we just say faculty, faculty ID. So since we have the faculty ID implemented as an attribute inside the lecturer's table, then definitely we need to specify that this should be of the same data type as an attribute that will be sending its key inside to the lecturer's table, else specifying that this is also of type num. And another key thing is we need now to specify that it shouldn't be now, because also that ID that will be coming inside this table from the faculty relation isn't also specified to be now. This shouldn't be now also. At the same time, this is now referencing, it references, that's the keyword which will specify that we are getting this ID from another table. This references the faculty as a table. It references the faculty, and specifically the attribute that we are bringing inside this is simply the faculty now as an attribute from the faculty relation. And definitely we can even now highlight this entire table to see if we've definitely created a table that will hold on to these details. So if we were to do this, and if we were now to run the query, of course we can now tell that, okay, table lecturer has now been created, and definitely it is successful because we've created the query for that. But what will happen now if we want to create, because we only created the lecturer's table, the faculty table, and the students table, meaning there are at least 2 more tables that we need to create. So since we've created, of course, the 3, then we are definitely remaining with at least the 2 needed tables for it to be complete with the database that we are making, which is the JDBC database. So let's first try to select the content of the lecturer's table for we to see if we've definitely implemented that. Then we are saying the lecturer, definitely if we do that and we run this query, we are expecting the actual design of this entire table to be out. Okay, so we can tell on our output and the query result, we have the 5 attributes inside, including the faculty ID as an attribute that's coming from the faculty table. So let's now proceed and create the other tables which we need. So the other table that we need is the courses table, the courses relation, because that's the keyword that we need to be using when it comes to database. So the keyword is create of course table, and the actual table is called course. And since we are creating the course, we can even do that. Since we are creating the course table, we can now keep certain information that are related to the courses, and if possible, even the keys that are coming in as foreign keys inside this table. So what are those keys? We have, of course, the attributes. We need to keep the course code as actually the attributes that we even hold on to the primary key of this thing, which is the course code, and this should be of type number and not now to say. And definitely, if it is not now, we are expecting this again to be a primary key. So definitely it is a primary key. And then what else should we do before we bring in now the foreign keys that are in charge of this table? We can bring in the course name, and definitely when we bring in the course name, we expect this to be of type variable, character, and 2, and of course of the length 30, and definitely that we can even put a comma and then related to that. So after that, we can now bring in those keys that are coming in as foreign keys from the different tables from the actual design that I showed you from the start of this session, because we'll be ending soon. So what are those? We have the faculty ID coming in as a primary key, as a foreign key inside this table. At the same time, we have the student number coming in as a foreign key inside this table. So definitely we'll say, okay, we have faculty, so let's say F ID, which should be of type number, and definitely since it is of type number, then we expect this not to be now, since also the place where we are getting this same content, it isn't now to say. And this references the faculty, and the actual attributes that we are bringing in is now called faculty num, and we do that. Then we also have another thing that's coming in as a foreign key inside this table, which is the actual primary key of the students from the students table. So now what do we do again? We can say, okay, ID, which is standing in as an attribute that we hold the ID for the student number. This should not be now, and of course this references of course the student as a table, and definitely the actual now, the very actual ID that it is referencing is the actual, is simply an attribute which is called student ID. And then when we do that, definitely we've implemented that thing. If we had run this query, automatically we'll see that we've created a course table also is created down here. Let's create the very final table that we need to create, which is the table which we are calling, of course, the in-row table. The table which we are calling the in-row table. And definitely when we do that, we need to understand that if you paid much attention from the design that I showed you at first, of course you can entail that the relationship between the course and the student was a many-to-many relationship. And when it comes, of course, from the design that we can implement many-to-many, yeah, it's fine. But when it comes to the actual implementation, we don't implement a many-to-many relationship. It should be broken down into an associative relationship, which is called a one-to-many and many-to-one relationship. So for we to implement that relationship, this is why we again added another table which is called in a row, because it will hold the primary keys that are coming from two different tables. So to say this, we need now to implement all the necessary primary keys which are coming in this in row table as foreign keys, which will connect the students and the courses as the relations on their own, associative entities and anything related to that, which is of course the actual theory that we receive. So to do that, we'll say C code as simply an attribute that will hold this code. C code is simply should be of type number, and since it is of type number, it shouldn't be now, because also the value that will come in isn't now. It shouldn't be now, and definitely this should reference, it references the course as a table, hence it references course as a table, and definitely the very actual attribute that is coming in as a foreign key is called a course code, because this is a primary key of this table. And as we understand, a primary key when it comes to another table, it is called a foreign key. So definitely this is done. And another thing, we need to bring in now the student ID that is coming from the students table, of course, as a student ID, as simply another attribute that would in the in row table as a foreign key. I'll paste this query and you will just change here. I'm sure you can even tell that this is now listeners, and we'll call this students ID, not number, not now, references the student and the student's ID. If we were to run this query, definitely we'll also create an in row table. Yeah, in row created. And if we were now to also insert at least 2 values of each and every pupil or each and every student, at least in the students table, for we to know now how we can insert such queries inside the table. So to insert content now inside the students table, because we need to insert at least the ID, the first name, the last name, and the age, because those are the attributes that are inside the students table. So for we to do this, the command we say is insert into student, that's the name of the table, and the values we are inserting are, of course, that's what we do. And the values we are inserting, we first need to insert the primary key for the first student. Let's put the primary key as, okay, let's say 303, and we say a comma. And since we now want to insert a variable character 2, then we need to open those single quotes for we to insert now the first name, Regan, and definitely after that we also insert the last name, which is Chanda, and the age. So definitely we are again done with the work. So yeah, so we've inserted the very first thing that needed to be inside the students table. If we were to end this query, and if we were to highlight this part, because we just want to run this part, then we'll say, okay, 1 row inserted. Now you said we need to insert at least 2 content inside the students table. I'll edit the same query, and then this ID, since it should be incrementing and it shouldn't be the same because not now, and of course unique since it's a primary key, I'll say this is at 304, and here now I will ask this week, and after that on the last name, which is Chisamu, then the age, let me put any age which is let me put 18, underage and anything related to that. If we were to execute this query again, we'll see that the data will be added into the students table, inserted to that. So how are we assured now that yes, we've added something from this table, we have added something into the students table? So we can now output the content that's inside the students table. So we'll say select the asterisk from student, and we end that. Definitely if we select and we run this query, we'll see that we have, of course, the values they are even incrementing in ascending order, because we have 1, 2, those are the total number, and we have 303, 304. The first detail added is Regan, last name Chanda, age 35, and the last thing is now the ID is 304, case week Chisam, 18 years old. So we've done, and thank you very much.